Good morning. So they've told me, everybody surely can hear with the mic, right? All right. So they've told me that I need to use a mic because of the Zoom link. So I'll just say up front, I would prefer to not be standing behind a podium for a lot of reasons. One of them being, I think, especially with something like trauma, it is more meaningful when I'm right out there and everything. So I apologize, but I've got to stay here. So I'm using this so that at least I'm not, which would make it even more awkward, right? So my name is Kathy McAtee Young. I have been an educator for 30 years. I've been an adult educator for 6.5 years, and I am a board certified mental health coach. I've got a specialty in trauma and then a further specialty in abuse. So the QR code there, which is also on your handout, will take you to an email list where I'll be sending out a bi-weekly newsletter or blog on trauma-informed instruction. If you go to other things that I've written, you'll notice a lot of stuff on abuse. I'll say a little more about that probably in a minute, but just so you know, that's very relevant for our student body as well. So if you come to something, you're like, well, that's abuse, that's not education, I would encourage you to at least skim it. I think you'll learn some things that would be helpful. So our subject today, so whatever he did made it. That doesn't work. That's good. Let's see. Well, can you go find him again? Because he turned whatever he did, disengaged my clicker. Our subject today is teaching through triggers and traumas, theirs and yours. So that title I picked really specifically because the reality is we have things in our lives and we have things in our past that affect how we show up, as do our students. So when I talk about our students this morning, please do not hear me othering them because they're not different than we are in these areas. We'll talk about some of the uniquenesses for them, but it's not in the fact that they have trauma and it's not in the fact that they get triggered. The other piece of that is please take care of yourself during this. I can't click. We had it. I can't advance the slide. I mean, I tried to advance on the keyboard and couldn't either. So let me just keep saying. So the other piece to this is while you're listening to this, please take care of yourself. If you need to stand up, please stand up. If you need to go get a drink, go get a drink. Everything will be trauma informed in the way I talk about it, but I understand that things strike different people differently. It had worked until I started the slideshow. Huh? Sure. Okay, so do I just need to use this touch screen then and not my clicker anymore? But at least you got it to advance. Hey, look at you. One more. Just so I believe you. No, go forward. Click one more.
Forward or back?
Forward. All right, really, that was just to prove to me that it was working. Thank you. So, okay. So let's jump in with this then. The concept of big T trauma and little t trauma, it all counts. So big T trauma would be single event occurrences that most of us would agree, yeah, that could be traumatic. Things like a natural disaster, a car wreck, an assault, some near-death experience. What's really meaningful has been the study of what we refer to as little t trauma. Now, hear me clearly. I'm talking about little t, so I'm going to say in quotes, lesser degree incidents, but no less impactful. The thing about little t trauma that's particularly impactful is the chronicity of it, because it continues to happen. So they may be quote unquote lesser events, but they happen frequently. And the neurological and neurobiological studies of this and research have shown little t trauma has the same effect as big T trauma. Can cause PTSD, causes literally actually complex PTSD, can affect us in the same way as big T trauma. So we want to recognize that within people's stories, within our own story, and understand little t trauma, these ongoing occurrences. It could be abuse, which also has some big T moments in it, but the constant belittling, berating, being yelled at, being humiliated, we might call that quote unquote little t trauma. It's going to affect you like big T trauma. Poverty, little t trauma. Racism, little t trauma. So those incidents are going to affect us and affect our students on a neurological level. What happened to me and what didn't happen to me. We'll look at that in just a minute, but especially for babies and young children, they are completely dependent. We are the most dependent little newborns of, I think of any type of animal. We need somebody for everything. And so quite literally, the things you don't get that you need are experienced neurobiologically as trauma. And then this definition. So Dr. Judith Herman, who I'm quoting here, she is one of the pioneers in trauma research. And in her book, Trauma and Recovery, she said that traumatic events overwhelm the ordinary systems of care. That's really important because the ordinary systems of care, I'm going to refer to that more as resources. It is a traumatic event when it overwhelms the resources that we have to face that. In neuroscience, we tend to refer to trauma as anything that overwhelms the nervous system's capacity to cope, so, which I love that as a definition. But for us specifically today, keep in mind that word resources, because our students are under-resourced. That's a really key recognition for us to have. I put something on my Substack on that a few days ago. They may not have the same resources that we have. The probably most poignant example of that for me was I had an online student who I had never met before. I had not even Zoomed with. He didn't know what I looked like. We talked on the phone, I think once, but we texted through his different classes and stuff. And I get a phone call one night about 11 o'clock. And I usually have my phone turned off by then, but I look and it's Jonathan, not his real name, but I am going to use names each time, even though they're not the real one, because I want this to be very personal, because it is. These are people's lives. These are people's stories. So I answer the phone. I'm like, Jonathan, what's up? And he starts crying, and he's in his early 20s, telling you that for context. He begins crying. He says, Miss Kathy, he starts telling me the things that are going on in his life that have nothing to do with school, personal things that he was experiencing. Then he tells me about his upbringing, that his parents aren't going to care what's going on, all these things. And then he said, Miss Kathy, I don't even want to live anymore. And you're the only person I thought might care. I am his online instructor. I have never met him. And I'm the only person he can think to call at 11 o'clock at night when he feels that way. That's under-resourced. So we have a real privilege when we step into our students' lives. So some of the things that may have affected our students, how many of you all have heard of the ACEs study, Adverse Childhood Experiences? Okay, so this is really powerful information. You can look back through this and other sources and get a lot more information on this. But it was a fascinating study that was actually done on adults when they kept seeing, it was done by an insurance company. They kept seeing certain physical problems. And so they began looking backwards into people's childhoods and recognizing 10 occurrences, experiences that they referred to as adverse childhood experiences that have a profound developmental effect, as well as longitudinally mental, emotional, and physical. So here are the 10 things from the ACEs study. That's funny. Okay. I bought the clicker just for today, so I was giving it a shot, but doggone it. I'm fine with this since I have to stand back here anyway. Here we go. So now I have a free hand, right? So I like the way this just kind of categorizes them. From 0 to 18, did you experience physical abuse? Did you experience emotional abuse? Did you experience sexual abuse? From 0 to 18, did you experience physical neglect? Did you experience emotional neglect? That goes to that piece of what didn't happen for you, being trauma. And then household dysfunction. In your household, was there mental illness, an incarcerated relative, your mother treated violently, substance abuse, or divorce? So I recognize we may see some of ourselves in this 10 point graphic. I'm going to pivot to our students. I don't know everybody's story of every student I've had, but of every student whose story I've known, I can maybe give one or two of them a 5. Everybody else is a 7 to 10. It's significant. So that's going to have an effect it's been proven. That can be overwhelming and almost hopeless, right? And I think that was why when this first came out, some people were motivated to go, wait. This can't mean that all hope is lost. And you all are proof, because for some of us who have higher numbers on this, you're here today. You have different resources come into play. You had some of the things I'm going to mention here in the next, and you've made your own choices, which you should be very proud of. So they did a study called PACES. What are some protective and compensatory experiences that can help mitigate some of the effects of these types of trauma, these 10 adverse childhood experiences? So I love this because the PACES are categorized in 2 different domains: supportive relationships and enriching resources. So in the supportive relationships, one of them was, an example was the unconditional love of a caregiver. I've had quite a few of my students who were raised by a grandma, or an aunt or a grandpa stepped in to raise them. Participation in a group. If they played on a sports team, that can really help, or they were in choir or something like that. And then having a mentor. So I highlighted that because even though our students are over 18 now, we can be that mentor. We can be that person that comes in and makes a difference and believes in them, as we'll keep saying throughout this is more powerful. And then the idea of enriching resources. You guys, we are the resource. You are the resource in your students' lives. And the things that your program brings in, those are resources. The curriculum you use, it's a resource. If you all have, give them access to bus passes or clothing or mental health or physical doctors and things like that, food, SNAP program things where that maybe you're connecting with, those are enriching resources. And I recognize, again, they're over 18, but we can still step in and help mitigate some of the circumstances that have been affecting them. So let's look at this a little bit, what's going on in the brain. So here are 2 parts of the brain. This is going to really be the neuroscience of threat or danger. So these 2 pieces are really helpful to understand. And I teach this to my students really quickly. So this is not going to get wildly intensive. 2 parts. I'm going to represent with my thumb the amygdala. So the amygdala is that little part down there by the brain center. It is the alarm system of the brain. It is all about fight, flight, freeze, and responds a couple of other ways we'll see in a minute. It has one goal. Your nervous system has one goal: keep you alive, right? Going to do whatever it can to try and keep you alive when there's a threat or it perceives a threat. So we've got our amygdala down here, and then our prefrontal cortex. So the prefrontal cortex is responsible for thinking, paying attention, self-control, remaining calm. That is our higher order thinking. That is our logical thinking, right? This is where I'm regulated. This is where we need our students to be. It's where they can be curious, where they can be creative. It's where we need to be as well. But we need them prefrontal cortex online when they're in class, and for sure when they're taking the tests. So what happens is our amygdala is constantly scanning the environment for perceived threat. It's called neuroception. So the amygdala is doing its thing all the time, even while you're sitting there right now. If there's a really loud noise, we're all going to have a different response, okay, whether we think it's a threat or not. So the amygdala is doing its thing, and we're going along. And if the amygdala perceives threat, you're going to flip your lid. So you can Google this or search this rather on YouTube. There are dozens of videos, diagrams, and things of flipping your lid. Again, I tell my students this. It's a normal response. It is an innate response. It is an instinctive response. It happens like that. When the amygdala perceives threat, you don't think it through. It just does something. The amygdala intervenes in a way. If a car is coming at you, you jump out of the way without even thinking about it, right? Which is good news when there's an actual threat. When there's an actual threat, we need to flip our lid. I don't need to know, the make and model of the car coming at me. I need flight. I need out of the way. But there's two challenges with this that happen. For one thing, we were not intended to live with the amygdala running the show the whole time. And so that's a very draining experience to have that happening. And the amygdala has limited strategies, as we'll look at in a minute. The other piece of this is my prefrontal cortex is offline. Have you ever had something happen that startled you so much, scared you, made you angry, whatever, and you're like, I could not even think straight? You're right. You could not, because your prefrontal cortex was offline. So we need strategies for ourselves and our students that help us bring that back online. If y'all want to move on in, go right ahead, please. We'd love for you to sit. Yeah. No, I'm sorry to call you out, but I just hate for you to stand for the whole thing. And you're all being way too sweet. It's like, come on, bring it on. It thrills me that this many people recognize how valuable this is, because in my opinion, this is the missing piece for really meaningfully being able to effectively intervene with our students and teach them. Okay, so flipping our lid. When we do this, here's a really helpful diagram and paradigm. A trauma neuroscientist coined this idea, and it has changed my life, and I'm not being hyperbolic. The idea of the window of tolerance. So the window of tolerance is this range of arousal where I can think my thoughts, I can feel my feelings, I stay regulated. So you look inside that window. It's where you're grounded, flexible, open and curious, present, and able to emotionally self-regulate. I love the fact that it's a range, right? It's not static. It's not like I am just right here and I am fine, I am regulated. That's not even regulated, is it? Sometimes I'm like excited and happy, still in my window, prefrontal cortex still online. Sometimes I'm frustrated and I'm a little annoyed, still in my window though, making decisions, prefrontal cortex still online. There's a range. Two really interesting pieces with this. One is that for trauma survivors, or trauma victims, whichever way you want to, I use those two words differently, but I'll go both ways for right now. The window is more narrow. Does that translate for students? Have you found that they're potentially more reactive than you might be in situations? Yeah. Neurologically, yes, that is correct. Now, here's the other piece I don't want you to miss. You can absolutely expand that window. I am living proof of that. So there are things that you can do. You can quite literally reset your nervous system. Thank goodness for that, right? So when we get knocked out of our window, sometimes because of real threat, other times because of perceived, and triggers, as we'll look in a minute, when we go up into hyperarousal, we see the high energy, anxiety, anger, overwhelm, hypervigilance, fight or flight, and the chaotic thinking. That's all about energy up here, right? If you think back to your 8th grade science, the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system, the parasympathetic, this is sympathetic. This is sympathetic nervous system energy. The fight or flight energy is all about mobilization. We are moving at the threat, we're moving against the threat, we're moving away from the threat, we're mobilizing, okay? Sometimes we drop down into what's referred to as hypoarousal. Down here, you'll experience shutdown, numbness, depression, passivity, being withdrawn, freeze, which is actually both parts, and I'll explain that in a minute, and shame. I'm out of my window, and I'm down here in the hypoarousal, as we'll look at more in a minute. So as I said, there are a couple things that can knock us out of this. Sometimes it's a real threat. And at that moment, it's a good thing, that I'm making a move for a minute. What I need is some skills to get back into that window. But the other thing is triggers. the ugly, the bad, and the good. I had my daughter create my PowerPoint and she said, you said that backwards. I'm like, I did that on purpose. It's like, seriously? So triggers, the ugly part of them. When you say or do something that does not align with your values. Have you ever been triggered, gotten really angry, really scared, really hurt, and you said or did something that's like, oh, that is not who I want to be? Side note, please repair that. When you do that, it's not like, well, that happened. You triggered me. Repair it. Apologize. I had that happen a few days ago. I wasn't technically triggered in a situation. A friend and I were talking about something that we're both really upset about, and I made a comment, and we hung up, and I'm like, oh, that is not the way I wanted to say that. And I know she knows what I meant, but we were both in meetings at that point. So I texted her and said, hey, I did not choose my words well. Words are very important. As he said yesterday, life and death are in the power of the tongue. He wasn't the first person to say that, our speaker, predated him, but words are important. And I said, I am sorry, that is not what I should have said. And, she responded back and said, no worries. I knew exactly what you meant. And I knew she did, but it's like, that's not who I am. That's not who I want to be. So repair it. Please repair it. Take accountability for it and repair it. Wouldn't that change a lot of relationships, right? If we could own those things. All right. So what's the bad part of a trigger? This is really powerful understanding. I'm going to read it and then explain it. You feel discomfort and or pain from re-experiencing past harmful or hurtful experiences. So here's the deal. A trigger is literally re-experiencing in your body that past trauma or pain. You're re-experiencing that event. I'm not just remembering it. A trigger does not happen in your mind. It's not like something happens and I go, that reminds me of that time that person really hurt me. I think triggered. I don't think triggered. I feel triggered. It's like, I feel it. It happened to me this morning and I could feel it. And I've done a lot. This is why I went back and got a lot of training in somatic therapy and everything to figure out. It's like, I was determined. It's like, I am going to reset my nervous system. I'm not fighting for safety to not be able to live it out, but to understand it, because I can feel in my body. I know where I feel shame. I know where I feel anger. I know I feel hurt. And so I'm experiencing something. I couldn't pin it down at the moment other than what I knew I felt. And then as I thought through it for a second, it's like, that's what, okay, now I know I'm feeling that in this situation. And that's, whoops, yeah, there it is. That's the good part, that you recognize that your body is telling you something and you're listening. Your body is giving you messages all the time. Your body is so wise and it's telling you things if you learn to listen to it and respond. So what are some of the reactions that we can have to a perceived threat? Well, I want to show the word perceived first off as the most important thing in this. Perceived threat. Remember, the amygdala is scanning. So it's not always a threat. So I'm saying that right now for anyone who's thinking, well, this does not pertain to my classroom because my classroom is not threatening. I believe you. I believe that's your goal. With all my heart, I believe that. We're going to look at our students' perspectives, though, in a minute. If they perceive threat, what happened? Threat. I went through my own techniques that we'll look at in a minute. It's like, I am completely safe here. I was somewhere else, though, in that moment. So here are the 4 that we talk about the most: fight, freeze, and fawn. Fight, I'm coming at it. There's anger, there's energy. Flight, I'm out of here. Freeze, so here's the interesting thing with freeze. It's actually equal and opposing forces. I have to, but I can't. I have to, but I can't. Ever felt that way? Like all the time, right? I mean, there's little things that happen all the time. You're like, oh my goodness, I have to do this, but I can't, right? Freeze. And then fawn, the please and appease response. I'm doing things to mitigate the threat. I'm hoping. Submit. My daughter is an animal lover, and she sent me a graphic the other day of how dogs do all 4 of these things. And specifically for the fawn one, they flip over in that submit, right? Yeah, it's powerful. So if we had an actual threat in this room, we would all four instinctively, without thinking, respond in one of these four things. So if a bear came racing in this room, okay, we're all four going to have one of these responses. For some of you, you're going to fight against the bear. That's living proof right there that your prefrontal cortex is offline, right? It's like, what on earth? But the reality is, if the threat's on you, last ditch, and we're taught that, right? Last final thing to do, fight it. You know, you don't go down without a fight. So some of you, you're going to be fighting against it, especially if you're close to the door, right? Some are going to be flight. You're going to be running out of here as fast as you can. Some are going to be freeze. I have to go, but I can't. I have to move, but I can't. Some of you are going to be fawn. You're going to be like taking your colleague, pushing them towards the bear, going, she's tastier, take her, right? Okay. So we're all going to do these things without thinking. So I have an example of the freeze response from the wild. Not too wild. So this is my grand dog, Dobby. So I was dog sitting Dobby. Yes, all you Harry Potter fans, it is that Dobby. I have the cutest picture of him as a little puppy with socks on. One of my other daughters put little socks on him. If you know the Harry Potter story, you get that. Very good. He is a free pup. So Dobby and I were sitting in the kitchen. I was dog sitting, and he perceived threat. If you see, well, my point, hey, there you go. Look at that. There is a bunny invader on his territory. Oh my word. My daughter has a magnetic screen door. He went flying through that and then just stopped. This is actually a video. It went on for 2.5 minutes. I called his name. I went back in and got the camera. I began filming. He was not moving, and that bunny was not. Now, there's a lot of activation going on both parts, though, isn't there? That little bunny, God bless him, you know his little heart. He's like, be cool, be cool. Well, if he doesn't notice you, he'll think you're a lawn ornament. You're going to have a little bunny heart attack out there, right? Dobby, same way. The way we resolved it eventually is I just gently took Dobby's collar, and when I just pulled his head at all like that, the bunny went flying underneath the fence. Because the funny thing for the bunny is Dobby was as scared of the bunny as the bunny was of Dobby. Both of them were threatened. Dobby is a lover, not a fighter. So he didn't know what to do with that either. But we know that feeling, don't we? I have to, but I can't. I think I need to go at that. I can't go at that. So I'm going to break out 2 more of this that they come under the freeze response. There's a whole paradigm with the nervous system called polyvagal theory that explains all this. You don't need to know it because, I mean, it's very helpful. For our purposes, we don't need it. But I want to highlight these other 2, and I'll explain why. So we have fight, flight, freeze, fawn, dissociate, and collapse, shut down. Dissociate. I'm here, but I'm not. I'm not processing what's going on at all, right? That's significant because that is a trauma response. I'll explain in a minute, really tracks. And then the collapse, shut down. That's the hypoarousal down here. It's lack of energy, can look like apathy, depression. It's really a nervous system response. So let me tell you how I've seen these in my students on the fight and flight. So my specialty is math. So I've done a few math boot camps where we do 2 weeks of intensive math. I do 3 hours a day for 2 weeks and get them through everything they need on the test. So I had a student, a woman who was in her 50s. Again, context matters. That's why I'm giving age. Loved her. She and I had been together for like 1.5 years. It taken that long to get her through tests because of fear and anxiety. And then specifically the math, she was pretty that I would not be able to get her through the math. And I was pretty sure we could. She was a bright woman. Just we had some things we needed to, shore up a little bit here. So we're doing math boot camp. I think it was day 3. And I'm getting a lot of energy from her. We'll call her Susan. Stopping. I'm seeing y'all seen pencils going right in classrooms and stuff like that, and all the nervousness. So she's showing some energy, and eventually she gets to a point where she takes her notebook, she slams it shut. She picks up her pencil, she slams it down on her pencil, on her notebook. She had a book bag, kind of purse. She grabs that, she slams it down the desk, stuffs her stuff in there, and storms out. Fight and flight. So it was a twofer, right? She stayed gone, didn't text me all day, and we had texted regularly, so that was unusual. Didn't text all evening. So finally I reach out to her and I'm like, Susan, you coming back tomorrow? Miss Kathy, why? What would be the point? You know, so we had to walk through a lot of those things. I will give you the ending. This ends like 2 weeks later, her and me on the floor in someone's office weeping after she passed that last test. Because the really amazing thing is she had grown children who had graduated college who did not know she did not have her high school diploma. Shame, right? She'd never told them until after she graduated that she was even doing the classes. So powerful. Freeze, as I said, I have to, but I can't. I have an online student who, this was about 2 months ago. Jonathan's 42. Is that the same name I used earlier? I'm not really good with pseudonyms. They're all named Jonathan for today, guys. No, let's go with Joseph. How about we'll pick another J name? So Joseph, we'd been working through the other subjects. All he had left was math. And it had taken a while for him to be willing to sign up for the test. His responses to my text made me wonder whether he was studying or not, but he signed up for the test. So I'm texting him on test day and I'm like, Joseph, how'd it go? And I get a response back, Miss Kathy, I'm not going to lie to you. Okay, that's good, but alarming, right? It's like, oh my goodness, what have you done? He'd no-showed. He had paid his own money and he had no-showed the test. I have to, but I can't. So I called him up and I said, how about this? We'll meet at McDonald's the next 2 Sundays and we'll work through this. Because I knew I could get him, you know, together in that amount of time. I'm not saying that you can teach everybody in 2 afternoons by any means, but I knew him and what he could do. So when I'm talking to him on the phone, he said, Miss Kathy, my apartment has never been cleaner. I said, oh, we're doing everything but study, aren't we? Yeah. Again, that energy, I have to, but I can't. But I got all this energy. So we started cleaning. So we met those 2 Sunday afternoons. And it was funny because one of the afternoons I was with one of my graduates and her 6 kids, and I was leaving her to go meet with him. And so I was telling her what was going on because I said, I need him to show up for the test next time because I know he'll be able to pass it if he'll just show up for the test. And she said, Miss Kathy knows when you're going to run. And she said, I remember, and she graduated like 3 years prior. And she said, I remember you calling me the night before my last test and saying, Shay, show up for the test. And she had all these reasons why she might not. And they were actually legitimate reasons, you know, that were going on suddenly in her life right then. I'm going to just show up for the test. So the freeze response. Fawn, I have another student, Sally. Look at that. I came up with a new name. And she would every day leave class and go, Miss Kathy, give me homework. I'm going to work on this. I'm going to work on all this. It's like, sweetheart, you are not. I know you're not going to do this. I didn't say that to her. What I actually did, because it was so important, because somewhere at some point she'd learn you got to keep people happy, right? Try and keep these authority people happy. I actually got some really simple puzzles, like 25-piece Disney character kind of things. She had young children that she was not very attentive to. So her assignment was to go do that puzzle with them that night. So it kind of worked for everybody. Dissociate. Have you had a student before where you're like, you're not listening to the thing I said? I've had students and sometimes they're so engaged and then other times it's like, I lost you. You know, and what you want to do is like, hello, don't do that. Okay. Please don't go up and do that to somebody. But I had a student who really bright and was really engaging with me, really motivated all the time. And then, well, I shouldn't say all the time. Every so often it's like, man, I lost you. Nothing seems to have changed, but I have lost you right now in this moment. And I didn't understand what was going on. And I was trying to figure it out. That's when I added these other two. She dissociates. So I know her story. And she 100% had to dissociate to survive the childhood she had. You couldn't have processed what would happen to her. So dissociate. And then the last, collapse, shut down. You may have seen this as well in students. We had a student who I had a really good relationship with her. So we'd actually started her through in math and writing. That wouldn't necessarily be the order I would always go. But she'd worked with me. She'd passed both of those. We'd moved on to another class. So she's in this other class and we were having a teacher's meeting. And I understand teachers' meetings are safe places to say the things that you're thinking. I'm going to give 2 adjectives that I would suggest you reframe when this is in your head. Hopefully with this new paradigm, it'll make a little more sense. But one of the other teachers described her as lazy and unmotivated. And I said, so it's neither. It's trauma. I hadn't learned all this yet. That's a lot of why I went back for my master's. But I'm like, nah, I know this is trauma. Here's what I know of her story. 28, 4 different kids from 4 different dads. And within the previous couple of months, one father had murdered another father. Would you be collapsed, shut down? Should we not just be celebrating she shows up every day? Oh my word, right? Perspective, guys. So look at this and think of your own students. Can you recognize some people in this? That this is the responses that they're having? And can you recognize yourself? So the truth for me is for about 20 years, I was collapsed, shut down. And I'm saying that because I did not present that way. I have 6 grown children. So I was raising all 6 of them. They all played very competitive sports. I was at everything. I coached several of the sports. I homeschooled 3 of my kids all the way through high school. I was doing all the things, but man, I was numb because of some things I was experiencing, which is why I can absolutely tell you that it's possible to reset, because then I find safety and I'm still experiencing that. I would be in an overwhelming situation, or I'd have too many things to do, and I would just feel myself sinking. And I'm like, nah, we are not going down like this. So that's when I researched it all and began to understand how to reset my nervous system. That's not my default anymore. That's not where I just go to when I get overwhelmed anymore. But it's really important for us to understand that for ourselves. And why is this so important for our students for us to understand this? Because learning is vulnerable. To learn, you have to admit you don't know something, and that's threatening. So if your student has a history of educational trauma layered on other personal trauma, he or she may be teetering on the edge of their window of tolerance just sitting in your classroom. I was generous and put if. They have educational trauma or they would not be GED students. And most likely it was personal trauma that led to them leaving school. So this is their perspective. Their perspective, you're thinking, my room is safe, I'm safe. And again, I believe you. This is their perspective. Sometimes there's a bear in the room. There is some kind of threat in the room. So I'm gonna take it off of that just because I don't want that image, because it will start stirring you up a little bit, and come back to this for a second and explain another little piece of this. There's something called implicit memory. Have you ever seen a pattern? You're like, oh my gosh, it looks like my grandma's couch. Or you taste some blueberry cobbler and you're like, ah, Nana used to make that. Or you smell something and it takes you a place. Or you hear a song and you're just back in some other event. My best illustration of this was a couple of years ago. I was in the kitchen, I'm cooking, and my hands are just covered in stuff. I think I was frying stuff because my hands are covered. I can't just stop and wipe my hands off in the middle of this because then I got to, restart all this. And I am weeping because the song is playing. And one of my daughters walks in the kitchen and she's like, what is going on? I'm like, I don't know. It's this song and I can't make it stop. My hands are dirty. And so I can't make it stop. And I don't know why I'm crying. And my daughter goes, Alexa, stop. I had stinking hands-free music on. I had flipped my lid. I'm not problem solving in the moment, right? At all. I could have told Alexa that. I had full power, completely lost that idea. And she's like, what is it? And I'm like, I don't know. It's this song. She goes, that's the song Kelsey walked down the aisle to. I'm like, oh, that's what it is. It was when my daughters got married, which was happy, but it was like she was moving to another state and we had been close and now she was, all the things, right? I couldn't put all that together, did not put all that together. So that's what implicit memory does. So think about our students. What was going on in their lives the last time they were in a classroom? Were they being bullied? Were they exhausted because they couldn't sleep at home because everybody was yelling? Were they hungry because they weren't fed enough? Were they pregnant and trying to figure out, am I going to be able to take care of this baby? Am I going to be able to finish school? Those things come back with them and they can't necessarily pin that down, but there's a bear in the room. So here's an amazing statistic that Brene Brown came up with from thousands of pages of research. Yes, ma'am. Window of tolerance. 85% of people can remember a shaming event that changed the way they think about themselves as learners. So let me start with this. Brene Brown daring classrooms. I highly recommend you go on YouTube and just search that. It's a 22-minute video. It's phenomenal. I have the URL at the end. All of this is research-based best practices. I have my resources page. The URL is about 900 characters. You'll never enter it correctly. That's a copy paste for sure, but just search that. It's outstanding. So 85% of people, that means pretty much everyone in here, myself included, we can remember a time in school, a shaming experience that made us think differently about ourselves as learners. I would suggest for our student body, it's probably higher. But here's again, it's kind of like the PACES thing. Well, what's the good news? Holy cow. Well, over 90% of people from her research can remember a teacher, coach, or administrator who made them believe in their self-worth when no one else did. I also have that. My 7th grade social studies teacher, Mr. Rainwater. So 7th grade social studies is not an incredibly rigorous course. I'm sorry if it was really hard for you. But it wasn't anything about the curriculum, right? It was just, he made me believe I can do anything. I can learn this stuff. And I remember that today. It's a long time later. We can be this for our students now. I have had so many students where I will text them things. I had somebody a couple of weeks ago, I'm texting saying, I'm so proud of you. You have the courage to show up to test. I believe in you. And she responded back and said, Miss Kathy, that is the sweetest text I've ever received. We have that ability, guys, to step into our students' lives. So how do we communicate effectively in a trauma-informed way? So trauma-informed, in my opinion, is an approach. I'm going to give you some skills that you can do, but it's the way you approach things. So I have more than one job, and at every one of my jobs, I'm trauma-informed because it's who I am. When I go to Walmart, I'm trauma-informed, which is probably fortunate, right? It's how I approach life because I recognize trauma is ubiquitous. So it's not like I will be trauma-informed here with you all, and I will not be here. But I am going to give you some skills. But it was interesting. So I was with a student a few days ago, a graduate, and I told her what I was doing here. And I wrote down her comment to me when I told her what I was going to be teaching on. She said, Miss Kathy, you taught me as though you understood what I was going through. That's trauma-informed. Yeah. That empathy, compassion should be a huge piece to all this, our response for us. So here are some things, though, that are some skills. Well, these aren't skills per se, but some approaches that are helpful. The first is be strength-based. All of our students have strengths. Find it and build on it. I had a student in my class, my math class, always sat right side, second seat. One day in class, I can just see tears coming down her eyes. So we took a break and I went over and I'm like, Sarah, what's going on? And she's, Miss Kathy, I can't understand this. Everyone else understands this. I don't understand this. I won't be able to do the math. So Sarah is Latina. And so I said, hey, you're bilingual, aren't you? And she said, yeah. I said, I mean, you speak fluent English here, but you speak Spanish at home, don't you? And she says, yeah. I said, so you know 2 languages? She goes, yeah. And I said, all right. So we already know you're smarter than I am because I only speak 1. And she did exactly that. She laughed, which helped her exhale. I'm like, all right, so we know you have the capacity to learn this. We're just going to give you some vocabulary. Here's a few more skills with math. We'll be good. And she did graduate. With the guy, Joseph, he was always sending me pictures when he should have been studying. Instead, I would get pictures of a before and after that he had renovated a bathroom, or he did a porch, beautiful. He put a pergola on it, and it was all the beautiful stuff. And he would send these things, and I was always going back, Joseph, that is amazing. Hey, you thought about looking at your math, but he would send me these pictures. So when we met, I said, all right, so I know you are crazy talented, because I would always send back and say, that is amazing. That is gorgeous. These things. So I know you're a logical thinker. I know you're a creative thinker. You're a problem solver. So we're just going to give a little language around all those skills, and we're going to be fine. And I said, and for like the geometry part of the test, you do this all the time. We call it area and perimeter. You call it work. So we just work from that perspective. It's like, you already know a lot of this. So find a strength and build on it. The next, no shame. Oh, you guys, shame is toxic, period. That's like full stop. Shame is toxic in the classroom, though, as well. And I understand that sometimes we may think I can make someone feel bad enough that they'll study. I'm seeing some people going, the research is the opposite. Will you maybe get them to do something really short term, like clean your room? Maybe, but long term, the research shows absolutely not. And it's so detrimental and it's threatening. So I'm very shame averse. I recognize it quickly. And I love fitness classes. And I will not go to a class where the instructor uses shame. So sometimes it's tone of voice, right? You've been in the class where they're like, come on, you can do it. And I'm like, yes, I can. Thank you for noticing. And then your other one, they're going, come on, you can do it. I'm like, I don't like your tone. And I don't think you believe that, So we can do it just with tone of voice with our students. Be very mindful of not using shame. So one of my jobs is actually in a cafe at fitness club where I work out. And so the head of the whole thing, he also taught a class, and he would come by and he's like, Kathy, you need to come to my class. Well, I had heard him because his class is out on the fitness floor. So I'd heard him. I just kind of let it go. Asked me another time, Kathy, you need to come to my class. Didn't say anything. One day then he comes in, he says, you need to come to my class. And I said, see, I won't come to your class because you use shame. He never asked again. But it's like, I had heard him. I'm like, nope, not going to do it. So I really encourage you to evaluate. And even if you're using it inadvertently, go out of your way to not. And that comes partly to this next piece even. Avoid using this 4-letter word. Anyone want to make a guess? I'll give you a clue. 4 letters. It's easy. Huh. It is easy. Ha, that was the clue. It's easy. Avoid using the word easy for 2 reasons. One, you could be using it kind of shaming to go, come on, it's easy. You know how to do this. It's easy. The other, innocently, you think you're being encouraging. You're like, this is the easy part. And they're sitting there going, I don't understand the easy part. I'm sunk when we get to the hard stuff. So I use the word simple when I'm teaching any of the stuff, but especially like math, I will sometimes say, okay, so this concept, it's simple, but it's not easy. It's going to be simple because I'm going to give you 3 steps. And if you apply them, but I really work to not use the word easy just because that can really have a different connotation Again, like even that, if I had said that with a different tone to you guys, I've been like, here's my clue. Come on, it's easy. And you're like, oh my gosh, I hate that when somebody's giving you a riddle or something and they're like, seriously, you can't figure it out? It's so obvious. That kind of hits me. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Something that has a similar effect is if you use red pen, because all their trauma in their past school has been red pen probably. So even use a pencil so that way you can easily erase it.
Thank you. It's like, I know that's a bad thing. When I used to get my papers marked up with red pen, you know, they may not think through all that, but they see it. So yeah, thank you. That can be a very shaming, have a shaming effect. The next piece, and hear me out on this, no competition. Okay, I don't mean like fun, oh, playing Jeopardy. I don't mean that. I mean pitting students against each other. There's just no reason for it. I love the camaraderie that has happened in all of my boot camps. Because they get supportive of each other. Because I tell them from the very beginning, here is the coolest thing about this. Because with boot camp, we require them to sign up to test. You know, that's a part of the deal if they're going to agree to it. Come to all 10 boot camps and to test at the end of it. There's going to be 12 of you. All 12 of you can test next Saturday, and all 12 of you can pass. It's not like, well, the top 10 scores pass, so sucks to be the bottom two. We're not competing against each other. And I don't need to be the fastest. I've had multiple times where, you know, I've got that one student in there who just wants to whiz through things. And so just as a little tip, the way I've handled that is I've caught them on break before and just said, hey, I know you work really fast. That's awesome. So if I've given y'all assignments to do or like problems to solve, you know, I might give them 6 to 8 problems or whatever. When you finish, take a picture of it and send it to me, and I'll grade it while we're waiting on everybody else, so that we don't distract everyone else. Because when they like plop their pencil down, you know, or maybe get up and get a drink even or whatever, that has an effect on the other students. So encourage them to support one another. And we're all working on the same goal here, right? And like we use a HiSET primarily. Whether you have an 8 or an 18, you passed. That, which is the name of the game in this, isn't it? You know, if you're going on to higher schooling, then I meet with some of my students who are now in college and help them with their math. But don't make them feel like they're lesser and less than. And then this last piece, self-agency. This comes a lot from my abuse training, and the voice and choice is the language we use in abuse, because with abuse, your voice has been taken away and your choice has been taken away. Now that's basically the same thing with trauma. Trauma is powerlessness. Okay, you're experiencing that. You don't have choice. No one chooses trauma. That's one of the defining qualities of it, right? But on my Substack yesterday, I put something on about voice and choice. So in ways that we can empower our students, really big word, but really meaningful word, we want to do that. So I know some programs may be set up where it's regimented. I have no problem with that. For me, I'm all online right now. So I let my students pick the first subject that they take. I don't just throw the barn door open. I usually say, hey, how about science or social studies? Because they are all working. That's why they're doing it online. They have children, all the things. I want to get them invested in the program. I understand the theories every which direction. That's just my thing. But in ways that you can give them voice and choice, it's helpful in the moment, and it's a life skill. And it's something, well, I would probably go 3. It's something that probably most of them have not had a lot of, especially if there's abuse in their past. I had a student probably 5 years ago. I couldn't find her. And I finally hunted her down. She's in our computer lab and she's crying. And I said, Gia, what happened? What's going on? You know? And she said, Miss Kathy, so-and-so just used power over me and I got abuse in my past and I don't like that. I mean, she had the language for it. It's like, yeah, I don't like that either. There is no reason for power over, right? It's power with. We're working together. It is a partnership with our students. But I would really encourage you to think of ways that we can empower them in decision-making and things. Here's a framework that I use. I don't say this to my students, but this is the way I think about it. You give me all you have today. I'll give you all I have to give today. Tomorrow may be different for both of us, and that's okay. So my daughter created this, and she's got, you know how the battery is. So this battery down here, if that's the only capacity I've got, that's 100% now, isn't it? Right? And let's be honest, we are not always on our A+ game. We have things that, say again? You will not be tomorrow. Yeah. Yep. Yes, that'll do it. We have things happening in our personal lives. We get an unexpected bill. We have a bad diagnosis. We have our own issues going on, families, all the things. But we show up and we give what we have. And I don't mean like burnout. I think you understand the illustration I'm saying. So here's the deal. Same thing for our students. So that student that is sitting in class and what you're thinking in your mind is you are not even trying. I'm going to propose they may be giving you everything they have today. That's a whole different way of thinking, isn't it? Tomorrow may be different for both of us, and that's okay. I've not said it. I don't have a problem with it right now. I'm teaching online, and so I don't say it. What I do tell my students is I will not work harder than you do, because that's not healthy for either of us, but I will not slow you down. We're going as fast as you can, as fast as your life allows you to. And I have reasons for that. And actually, that's on my Substack too, why I think that way. But yeah, there's no problem with saying this to them at all. But recognizing for ourselves, you're probably giving me everything you've got today. So a meaningful, again, compassionate way of looking at it. So let me give you a couple of skills. You may see these and immediately a couple of you may go, I already know that one. Hang on, because I'm going to give you a little neuroscience behind this that I think will make it even more efficacious. So stay with me for a sec. The first skill, and I teach this to all my students. I teach this in every capacity I'm in. I also tutor 9th grade geometry students for a private school. I do it all by Zoom. And I teach this to them. I tell their parents at the very beginning, they're going to learn a little neuroscience. And they're like, will it help their math? Yes, it will. They're like, knock stuff out. It's like, and it'll help their free throws and their volleyball serving and all the things, right? So the first thing is breathing. Let me give you a little more on this. There are multiple paradigms for this, multiple ways of doing this that are all great. There's a box breathing, 4-4-4-4. There's a 4-7-8. What I tell my students is we want our exhale longer than our inhale. It is diaphragmatic breathing. No, I do not say that to my students. We breathe in through our nose, we breathe out through our mouth like you're blowing out a candle. With my students, I do this with them online. When I do boot camp, we do it every morning before class, especially that last week. I'm gonna do just 3 rounds with you, and then I'm gonna explain something else to you. Don't freak out and think I wasn't on her count. You know, that can be it's okay, right? But just, we're gonna go in for 4 and out for 6. So that's all we're gonna do. So let's just do this for a second. It settles you. And here's why. This is not TikTok, guys. It's neuroscience. Because if a bear came in the room, none of us would be going. Am I right? So breathing like that tells your nervous system you're safe. That's why it works. It calms down the nervous system. I tell my students, I want you to hear my voice saying breathe when you're on that test. In my 6.5 years, I've had 2 students who separately, different years, came back from the math test, both passed, but came back and said, Miss Kathy, when they turned that computer on, the first question came up, everything went dark. I could not see anything. And I started to panic. And then I remembered I kept hearing your voice saying, breathe, breathe. So I did that and it began to clear up. I tell them when you come to a problem that's really hard, click an answer, breathe and move on. You know, if you come to a problem, you're like, I could work on this for 3 weeks and I won't get it. Click an answer and move on, but breathe through the test. First question comes up and you're like, I don't know that. It's okay. We didn't need the first one to pass the test. We're good. Breathe. Okay. The second is grounding. Lots of ways to do this. What I teach just as quickly as what I'm going to say to you guys is 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, using your senses. So look around the room right now and think of 5 things that you see. And don't be vague like wall, ceiling, floor. Give a little more detail, like the pattern on the carpet, the windows there, the glass, the circle on the ceiling. So go through that. What are 4 things you can touch? Touch my pants, touch this, touch my clicker. What are 3 things you can hear? I hear the AC unit. You might hear people walking by. You're hearing your computer humming, things like that. 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste if you go through it all. But here's the thing. It is mindfulness. It's making you present. It's having you look around your environment and ground yourself and remind yourself you're safe. So I do this with my 9th graders. And what was funny was in prepping them for a final, their big final they were taking. And 9th grade is your first year that you're transcripted. So it kind of tends to be, can be a really big deal. You know, your parent, you got a lot of pressure from your parents sometimes. And I was reminding each of them separately because I do them all one-on-one. I remember on your final, when she passes it out, breathe and ground yourself and remind yourself there's not a bear in the room. And 2 of them said separately, but it feels like there is. Yep, it does. Right. And so that's why we do it. That's what I was doing this morning when I got triggered in something. It's like, wait, look, I am completely safe where I'm at right now. I am completely safe. Okay. And then this last thing, you know enough to pass the test. That's what I tell my students if I've recommended they test. I've had a couple who've scheduled without me saying that, and they're not concerned with what I think anyway, right? Or they, because they sign up on their own. They're not the ones coming back going, do you think I'll pass? But all my other ones, oh my goodness, all my students, do you think I'm gonna pass, Miss Kathy? Am I gonna pass, Miss Kathy? And if I've recommended, then I believe you know enough to pass the test. They'll say that, but the reality is, I don't know how you're going to show up on the test. I don't know what's going to happen. And I don't want to lie to you and go, you are totally going to pass this. You're probably going to ace it. I've had students who are like, Miss Kathy, I'm going to ace it. And I'm like, an 8 is fine, you know, but love the spirit. So this is what I began to say. And this is what I text my students too. You know enough to pass the test. Breathe. Show up for the test. I have been adding that to my text actually now. Show up for the test. So I hope this gives you some tracks to run on with your students, and hope it gives you some framework. That is my reference slide. If any of you are just dying to, you're welcome to take a picture of it. It's a lot of craziness. I can put the references up. I'm not putting the whole PowerPoint. I am putting the handout, but I can't do it in here. I don't know what the deal is. So I'll do it when I get home. I use I'll put that on there. So you can look these things up and you can find your research yourself. This is my contact information. So this, just like on the handout you have, this goes to my Substack if you're interested in that. I would love any questions. First off, we have a few minutes here, but also I'll say, don't hesitate to email me questions that you have. I love this stuff. I know it is life-changing. I know it is life-changing, and I believe it is for our students as well and for how we interact with them. So I'm happy to answer questions. And does anybody have anything you want to ask now?
If you're having an anxiety attack or about to have a panic attack, to either take a packet of salt or something super sour, because it'll get your brain to.
Yes. So she's talking about if you're having a lot of anxiety in the moment, or even anxiety attack, eating something sour or salt, that's the one in the grounding. That's the things you can taste. You can also put your hands in cold water. The reasons I teach the things I do, there are other skills that I use in my coaching and in my own life. specifically with coming out of overwhelm, the shutdown. But these are the two that are accessible in the test, you know, which is why I show those.
Thank you so much for all of this. I was just wondering if you had a moment to do any quick more on that self-agency, voice and choice, in the sense of sometimes when I've tried that, it's somebody's like, you pick, you know, this idea of like just empowering somebody to make a choice in some cases. And I know that comes from past trauma and maybe not having choices. And I don't know if it is just a matter of getting the environment safe enough to feel that somebody can.
Yeah, so that's a great question. The idea of voice and choice. And yes, some of that comes down to the environment. We have what we refer to in psychological terms as we need disconfirming experiences, and we need a bunch of them to keep proving, okay, you're not going to turn on me, you know, or I'm not going to make the wrong decision and everything's going to, you know, go to heck. Sometimes what I do, I start with smaller things like that with maybe, like I said, how about science or social studies? So narrowing it down can help. And then being really gentle in how you approach those things. I do have actually a funny story on that. So I won't give the whole personality assessment thing, but my youngest daughter is the personality that really goes along with things and doesn't, I mean, she's brilliant. She made my PowerPoint and everything. She's 23 now. Doesn't really care about, it's like, that's fine. I don't care where we go to eat. That's truly her. So I assumed it was because she's the youngest of 6, very competitive, and there was a lot of verbal and emotional abuse in our home, not from me. So I'm assuming it's a trauma response. And about 5 years ago, I learned a particular personality assessment, and I began looking at my kids through this. And I realized she is this particular number. And so I went to her and I said, so all those times where because she's the youngest, you know, it'd be just her and me, like after church going out to eat. And I'd say, where do you want to go? And she'd be like, I don't care. I said, so all those times I've been asking you that and you've said, I don't care. You really don't care? And she goes, no, I really don't. I'm like, I thought, you know, I'm sweetheart, I'm safe. She really didn't care. But even with her, what I had learned to do is give her 2 things. It's like, all right, do you want Chinese or Mexican? Whatever. But there is that exception with like in that kind of thing, she really didn't care. And so sometimes there are people who it's like, I really don't care. But giving them down to 2 choices can do it. Otherwise, though, empowering. So I'll toggle slightly. Abuse is the most disempowering experience because it's all about power and control. That is the hub. That is the core of abuse. So taking away your power, disempowering you. So being re-empowered, having a voice and choice is very uncomfortable and very frightening. And really, that goes for trauma, all trauma. So here's my dealio. Not all trauma is abuse, but all abuse is trauma. Okay. So that's why I say you'll get some great stuff if just understanding more about abuse for your students and statistically for other people in your life.
Oh, I had a big mouth. Oh, gotcha. So the window of tolerance slide there with the line going through it, I was wondering if that's the person's reactions and their window of tolerance is the same with all of us, or our windows of tolerance can be quite wide or quite narrow. And if so, how do I'm assuming that's long-term change so how do we help our students in terms of that long-term?
Okay, so it's a great question. And yes, that's why I like the zigzag thing on here, because it's not this just perfect, static, regimented reaction. I can be up and down within that. I have some variants where I've not flipped my lid, right? I can be excited, motivated, angry even, or sad, disappointed, and still be within my window. Yes, it differs for every person because of our own experiences, just like what triggers each of us are different things. Things that trigger me might not trigger you and vice versa. Same for our students. So for people with trauma, researched, it is a more narrow window. You can learn to, disconfirming experiences are really meaningful. Actually getting safety is really important. And then there's some really intentional work that you can do that expands your window to where you can tolerate a lot more. The fun little piece on that, I'll just say, is learning to take quote unquote tolerable steps. You know, what makes it tolerable, especially like out of freeze, what makes it tolerable? Okay, it's uncomfortable, but I can tolerate it. If I can do it, it is a tolerable step. What's that next thing? What's the smallest increment I can take toward whatever it is I need to do? Does that help a little? Yes, it takes, and one of the ways, by the way, one of the ways we can help, one of the most meaningful things we do is co-regulation. If I am regulated, I can help co-regulate you. Like even for some of you who maybe came in here stressed, or maybe when I showed you the ACEs thing, you're like, oh, I hope through listening to me that you're calm and settled in the things that I've said, because I'm very regulated. I'm very within my window in this moment. And we have that ability with our students, very much so, and anyone you're around. And the flip side of that, by the way, one of the most contagious emotions, anxiety. Oh my goodness, have you been in a teacher's meeting and one person gets anxious? The whole room is gone, right? So you don't want to be anxious in your classroom either. Yes. I'll repeat it. I'll repeat it. I'll repeat it. But I'll repeat it. Go for it. Yes. So yes. So she's asking about the window of tolerance, and can some of that be a generational thing? Absolutely. And there's a whole lot to that besides technology, besides our more limited ability to concentrate on things and look at things. There's literally epigenetics. There's also things about the fact that that's the way you're brought up. So if mom always reacted when that happened, you know, and so it takes relearning to say, you know what, there's a different way to react. I know that's what your dad did every time you did poorly on a test. I'm not going to react that way. And you don't need to. You don't need to say those shaming messages to yourself now. So we can change those patterns. I mean, thank God, if we were all just victims of, you know, how we're brought up or the generation ahead of us, and some of us had wonderful stories. But we, again, have agency. We can make some different choices. Is that good? Uh-huh. So she's asking about how you take trauma-informed instruction and really transform it into actions. So a few different pieces. For one thing, the information is pretty compelling. And understanding this is my student's perspective, that alone should be a shift. So I will just say within this, you have my contact information. I love speaking to organizations, to students, things like that. Then learning some of those simple skills, even the one that no shame. And I'll tell you, if you get pushback from somebody, we know we've hit a point. You know, if you have a teacher who's like, I think shame, I think it's going to work in this situation. It's like, okay, then we know now you know an area that you're going to need to gently step into. Does that make sense? Yeah, where you get resistance gives you a lot of information, doesn't it? All right, so if you have more questions, feel free to ask me in person, or you're welcome to email me. Thank you all very much for coming.